Hello, I'm Shelby Trevor. Welcome to episode 3 of the first course in my video series from my learning library. In this episode, I'm going to talk about the different parts of the violin and different parts of the bow. And I'm going to show you what they're for. So, let's take a look. Okay, so I have my violin here. I'm going to start from the top of the violin and I'm going to work my way down. So, at the top of the violin we have the scroll. So the scroll is this spiral pattern of wood, and this is all one piece of wood from the scroll down to the neck where it attaches to the body of the violin. In the head of the violin here, we also have the pegs, which go into this box or this hollowed out part of the head, which is called the peg box. So the pegs go into the peg box, and inside of the peg box, the strings attach to the pegs so that you can tighten the strings and hold the strings in position. So the pegs are tapered so that they stay in the holes, and that helps you to kind of loosen them and tighten them by wedging them into the holes. And you see there's this curve which defines where the neck starts and where the head ends. And the neck is this long straight part here. Again, this is all one piece of wood. The neck is where we really have a lot of action in our hand to access the strings and change the notes with our fingers. And also attached to the neck is the fingerboard, which is named so because we put our fingers on the fingerboard. And there's also this small piece of ebony wood. Sometimes it's a different type of wood, but this right here is called the nut. And it raises the strings off the fingerboard. So, over the fingerboard we have the strings, where all the magic happens, because that's where we get sound, that's where we change the notes. That's really very important part of the violin. And they go over the bridge, which is this piece of lighter wood here. So the bridge holds the strings up over the fingerboard, and then they usually attach to a tailpiece. A typical tailpiece will usually look like this, where it's usually a piece of black wood, sometimes plastic for less expensive instruments, and often fine tuners can be attached to the tailpiece. My violin is a little bit of a customized system where I don't have a tailpiece, but each string attaches to a separate wire. The tailpiece then attaches to the end button, which is down here on this bottom part, this lower part of the violin. So the strings are all held by tension on top of the violin like this. And they're all held by the end button on this side and then by the pegs on this end. The bridge sits on the top plate, we call it the top of the violin. Carved into the top of the violin are these F holes, which are shaped kind of like fancy Fs or like S's, and that's where the sound comes out and projects out of the instrument. Interestingly, all violins have this curve to them. So we call this the C-bout, and that's for the bow to be able to play on the strings on this side and then the string on this side. So these are the sides, or they're called the ribs of the violin. And that's made out of maple usually. The back is also usually made out of maple. So down here I have this piece of material which is called the chinrest, and that's where I put my chin or my jaw. Inside of the violin there's a sound post, and that's a very important piece. And then on this side, on the inside, there's a bar that runs along the top plate called the bass bar. And the sound post helps to produce the treble sound. The bass bar helps to produce the bass sound. Now, the fine tuners on a violin are the screws that attach to a mechanism that holds onto the string here. And those are used to tune your violin when you're making fine adjustments, hence the name fine tuners. So those are the basic parts of the violin that we need to know for now as we get started. And next, I'm going to take a look at the bow. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so here I have my bow. And the different parts that are important to know about the bow. The stick, which is the main thing about the bow. It's the stick of wood that goes all the way along. It's one solid piece, usually, unless it was like broken and repaired. And then on the other side, we have the hair. So you have the stick and the hair. Two probably most crucial parts of the bow in a way. So the hair is where you apply pressure to the string to make a sound. So the hair attaches on this end to the frog, which is this black square rectangle shaped piece with the little notch in it here. And it's attached, the hair is attached on this end to the tip of the bow. Do not touch the hair. So that's important, not to touch the bow hair, because then the rosin on the bow will lose its luster, it'll lose its stickiness, and the bow will stop making a sound on the parts that you touch. And that's not good, because we want to have a nice consistent sound that we can rely on throughout the whole span of the bow, or length of the bow. So down on this side is where more of the mechanisms of the bow are. Here's the winding. This is used to both protect the stick from your hand, and it's also meant to help with weight. So it's a specific weight that it's helping with the balance of the bow. And then in a little further towards the hand is this leather grip, which sometimes that's leather, sometimes it's something else, but that's also really for protection of the bow, and it's a little bit more cushiony for your hand. This right here is the screw that tightens and loosens the hair on the bow. So right now I'm tightening the bow, and you'll see that the hair is getting tighter and the stick is straightening because of the tension. When I play, I want to add tension to the bow, and when I'm not playing, I want to loosen the bow. It's very important that I loosen the bow when I'm not playing, because tension on the bow over time can warp the stick. The screw is very important because that's what regulates the tension on the bow. And when you loosen the bow, you don't need to loosen it too much. The screw can come all the way out, and you don't really want to do that. It's not really a big deal. If it happens, you don't really need to do that. But you just want it to be loose enough so that you can see the hair is loose. It's not like really, really, really loose where it's flopping around, but it's not putting any tension on the stick, and we can see that here. So that's about as much as I need it to be loose when I put it away. So another important part of the bow is just the point in the bow, the concept of the balance point. This point is where the bow balances. Notice how it's much closer to the frog because of all of the weight on this side compared to this side. So the bow is thinner on this side, and there's much less sort of mechanics and mass over here. So it's going to balance very far to this side, and that's an important spot to be aware of on your bows. Where does the bow balance? I'll talk more about that when we start to talk about actually playing. So I'm going to take my bow, and I'm going to put it back in the case carefully. There's one other thing I want to cover, which is the shoulder rest. There are a lot of different kinds of shoulder rests. And I put the shoulder rest on the bottom plate And I always want to be careful when I do that. I want to make sure it's the right size and that it's not hurting the violin at all. But I'm going to put the shoulder rest here, carefully, on the bottom like this. So this kind of just stabilizes it and gives me a little bit of padding and kind of structure to fit my shoulder. This is a very form-fitting shoulder rest. There are lots of different kinds of shoulder rests, but this helps me when I'm holding the instrument. So there are a lot of different solutions for shoulder rest or that kind of thing. So some people use a foam pad with rubber bands. You can do that. Some people use different brands of shoulder rests. They make sponges that are specifically shaped and sized, and there's all kinds of products. You can check it out and do the research yourself, try a bunch of different stuff. I use the shoulder rest. I use this kind of a shoulder rest. I've tried different kinds. I've tried everything. I've tried the inflatable kind. I've tried sponges. I've tried using no shoulder rest. Similarly, the chin rest is also important. So having a chin rest that is comfortable, that might matter. It may not matter to you if you're a beginner. That's something that you kind of usually refine in your preference over time. And you kind of get an understanding of what you want in a shoulder rest and in a chin rest as you develop as a player and you figure out what fits your body and your style of playing and the things you're trying to achieve. On most beginner instruments, you're not going to have to worry too much about the chin rest. Just use what's there. Most likely that's going to be fine. Unless you have a problem with maybe like you have a very long neck or you have some other kind of thing that's just not working for you, then you might want to look for solutions, and that's fine. That makes sense if you need to do that. But the Kuhn shoulder rest is a very basic shoulder rest that's good to start with. There's also the Ever rest. I don't necessarily recommend any of them specifically. I just say, try what works. Sometimes I use a foam pad for my young students, and that works fine. Sometimes they want to use shoulder rests, and some instruments will have a shoulder rest kind of in the case already. Again, usually I tell people a good starting point is the Kuhn shoulder rest. It's just going to make things a little bit easier at the beginning, and as you develop, maybe after several years, you can try other options if you want to. I wanted to mention one other accessory and really essential part of your violin outfit, which is for the bow, and it's called rosin. And rosin can be a lot of different things. It can be round like this, and we apply it to the hair. And I'll talk more about this in other videos, like how to rosin and how much to use and when you need it and stuff like that. But it's something that you should have, and it's something that usually comes with a violin. There's also rosin that comes in a rectangle, like a rectangular box, and has little grips on the side. Oh, mine just fell apart. And it's like in a rectangle shape, and you rub it on like that. So that's typical for like beginner rosin that you'll get, and usually that works fine. Mine's a bit cracked, but it works still fine. So yeah, rosin is essential, and you'll need that, and we'll talk more about that in future videos. So that covers the parts of the violin and the bow and some of the accessories that you're going to need to get started. And we'll talk more about the next steps for getting started with your violin in future videos. Thank you.